Okay, gonna be getting started here. Give the unk start. Uh, at this in the chat, any tips on a double leg? Yes, actually, a lot of tips. Too many tips. One second, let me. Honestly, a double leg, like the biggest difference between. One second, let me turn my music down. The biggest thing that made my wrestling really good when I first started jiu-jitsu, it was terrible, right? Because developing a good double leg actually takes a very, very long time. And you'd be surprised how athletic you need to be to develop a good double leg. But honestly, the biggest difference between when I started, I came from a background of I did some judo, but I didn't have like a ton of experience. But the biggest difference was twofold. Number one is you have to almost expect that the double leg that you shoot the first time, it's going to fail. It's going to not be successful. The difference between a good wrestler and a bad wrestler and grappler in general is like you should know if you like shoot a double, you take the guy down immediately. Cool, right? That's going to happen 1 out of 10 times, and especially if you're training with someone who's not as good as you. It's going to happen. But once you get past a certain experience level, once you get past a certain, I would say, time, right, you should expect your double legs. The first one's going to fail. The second one is going to fail. The third one is where you make the money. And what you start to notice is as you go into higher levels of grappling, everyone expects this. Everyone knows that the first shot is to get you to the second shot, to get you to the third shot. And once I really started to chain those techniques together, like I would go from, all of a sudden I'm trying to shoot a double, right? I'm getting stuffed. I'm getting sprawled on. It's terrible time, right? And I used to train with a lot of heavyweights. I'm a heavyweight myself, but a heavyweight who can grapple, who's grappled for a decade versus me in just a couple of years, right? It was terrible. So I had a lot of hesitancy and a lot of like second thoughts when I was shooting. But as you get more experience, you'll start to build up that confidence. You'll start to understand that the first, second, even the third shot at times, it's okay. You're just shooting to get in there, right? You're just not really shooting to take him down. The real work starts once you get that connection. Once you close the arms around the legs, single leg, etc. And then the last thing I would say is you really need to get comfortable with failing because the first 2 years, like you're going to get sprawled on nonstop. You need to be comfortable with saying, okay, I'm going to get sprawled on. It doesn't matter. I'm learning. It doesn't matter. I trust myself enough that eventually this is going to pay off and eventually it's going to lead to a point where like when I get sprawled on now, like I just expect it, right? I'm immediately starting to move, starting to build up my base. You should be able to handle that. And that only comes with repetitions and experience. And you're only going to get that if you're willing to put yourself in that position. So just basically the gist here is like just keep shooting, get confident, and then start to develop some skills around building your base back up. That's probably the biggest thing as well, right? Building your base. But here, I'll shoot you this link, but it's supposed to be a coding stream. If we're talking about wrestling, let's go. But this guy, Kerry Colat, he's a very good instructor at breaking down these concepts. Very complex, but these are actually really good details. Hang on, let me turn this off. All right. Give me a second. So that's a very good example, right? Like he's recognizing that, if you just shoot on someone, right, they're not going to just take it. They're going to stop you. They're going to sprawl on you. You should expect that. You should expect that. And you should be ready to, this is called a dump. But there's a bunch of different variations, right? There's running the pipe. There's arm drags. There's super ducks that you can do. There's all kinds of things you can do. But to close it out here, number one, get comfortable and like understand that you're gonna fail the first. I would say even the first couple of years, even the first 3 years. I really didn't start getting comfortable wrestling. Like actually standing up. I didn't get comfortable wrestling until like 6 years in, where I could feel that I could hold my own. So expect to fail. Number two, your first shot is to get you to the second shot, to get you to the third shot. And number three, get good at this, right? At running into that wall, so to speak, running into that resistance. And you should already have 2-3 answers to deal with that, whether it's getting sprawled on, whether it's your shot, being stopped just by pure strength. Maybe they got an underhook, they got a good whizzer, etc., etc. You should be able to have at least 2-3 go-to moves to handle that. But that's the biggest difference between being a good wrestler and a bad wrestler. And especially if you don't start wrestling at a young age, like it's very difficult to find wrestling as an adult. You can find jiu-jitsu all day, but like wrestling, you're really not going to find in a lot of places. Actually, I went to go train with a couple of high school teams, and the difference that they do, it's like I've trained with everyone, right? I've trained with professional MMA fighters. I've trained with Olympic judo players. I've trained with professional MMA fighters, professional quote unquote jiu-jitsu fighters. I've never felt the work capacity, like the sheer volume of training, until I started training with high school wrestlers. And like they'll just train for 2 hours and they're doing a lot of drilling. They're doing a lot of emphasis on like not so much like the details of the movement, but just like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of reps within one single practice. And then I remember this very clearly because it was such a shock to me, but like we would finish this 2-hour practice and then they would be like, okay, if you're on the team, go hit 60 pull-ups. Right? It's like, what are you talking about? We just did 2 hours of grappling. We did 2 hours of drilling. And then afterwards, what they call a go live, which is just sparring. And then they're like, okay, go and do 30 pull-ups, as many reps as it takes you. Like basically you could do like one at a time if you wanted to. But yeah, wrestling is very difficult skill to learn. So get comfortable with the idea that it's going to take a while for you to develop that skill. And that's okay. Okay, let me jump back in. But that was a good question. Thank you. Actually, I love talking about wrestling. Problem is nobody cares at all about grappling or MMA. One sec, let me turn our music down. Actually, good tips, really. Thank you. Also, video was very good. Chaining, I need to learn more things, but yeah, honestly, like for you, since you are so new to it, I would say like really focus on the fundamentals of wrestling. What I mean like your stance, where's your weight focused on? Like, are you like super nervous to get sprawled on, et cetera, et cetera. The biggest bang for buck as far as like time to like skill wise, I would say develop a really good wrestling stance. You should have your head low. You should have your lead hand protecting your lead leg. And you should be low to the ground, not standing very upright, because that's going to help prevent. Those three things are your first layers of defense: your head, your height, and then the lead leg. Those three things, like I can almost tell immediately when I'm going to take someone down because they're not doing 2 out of those 3 things. Versus when I see someone who's like, they have a low stance, they got their head low, they're protecting that lead leg, because the mechanics of a wrestling shot, like you have to touch that lead leg. Closing that distance is the hardest part. If you're leaving your lead leg unprotected, I'm going to go for it all day, right? But if all of a sudden I see him like, now he's dropping his hands, he's dropping his shoulder to protect that lead leg, okay, it's going to be 10 times more difficult. But yeah, no worries, man. Anytime. I love talking about it. In another life, I'm a wrestling teacher. But yeah. So I would say learn the fundamentals, which is your stance, which is a good single, a good double. This chaining stuff, it'll come to you with experience. Let me switch focus here. All right. All right. Like jump into something completely different. So I would say I was reading this article by Alex Fazio, the Italian Stallion. A really good article. Really recommend people go and check it out. It's pretty long. That's a good thing in my opinion because there's a lot of different little things that he threw in there, and it took me a while to read, but it's a very, very good read in my opinion. I really recommend that you go and read it because he goes into detail about a lot of different things. And me and Alex are kind of the same, where we tend to do a lot of posting that's, what do you want to call it, shit posting, whatever, memes. But Alex is actually very technical skilled. Well, I won't talk about him, but he actually knows what he's talking about. And a lot of these things that he was going over, I was finding the similar conclusions. And actually, like, a big part of my job this year was upskilling the teams to learn how to use some of these tools. So I'm going to write an article about this, but I kind of just want to explore my ideas, explore my thoughts, because I was under the impression that it was going to be very easy, right? Like, just throw them on Cursor, throw them on Colat Code, whatever. And like, we'll get this in a week, right? But what ended up happening was I ended up having a lot of trouble in the beginning because I was like throwing people onto Colat Code or Cursor. I would train them for a couple of days. I'd be like, all right, here's how you do this, here's how you do that. Come back a week later, and they would basically just give up. They would have an initial good start and then just say, nah, like I'm not feeling it, or it did this and I didn't know what to do. I just gave up on it, which was really surprising me because if you were just on X, right, you would think everyone and their mom is using these code agents. But especially as you start to get into the more enterprise, more medium-sized organizations, old organizations not strictly focused on tech, a lot of these tools are still very unknown. And I would say just now people are starting to get to, what do you want to call it, get comfortable, get familiar with these tools. The idea that an agent is going to write production code, that's actually a very novel concept for a lot of people. Okay. So two things, right? Two things to start this off with. The first thing is you still need to have a deep understanding. You still need a deep understanding of what code is doing. You still need to have a deep understanding of what the code is actually doing, right? Like, you should be able to look at a piece of code, right? You should be able to, like, just an example that I was working on, right? But you should be able to say, okay, I know what's going on here, right? There's these imports, got my first class here that's going to be used, right? And what ends up happening sometimes, the models have gotten so good that you can just one-shot things, and unfortunately that can lead to people just hitting tab or just hitting enter whenever the code agent brings up a suggestion that's going to look very good. And the agents, the models, they have a very convincing personality, right? Like, it will say something that's completely retarded, but it makes it sound in such a good professional, like, fancy word cell sounding way. Where it's like, oh yeah, that does make sense, right? We do need to make 3 new files for just testing out this one simple component, right? And what ends up happening is, like, sometimes the more inexperienced people will accept that and they'll give their justification that the code agent gave them and think that's acceptable. I think that's okay. You need to be very careful with that, and you still need to have a deep understanding. You should be, especially if you're in your junior part of your career, you still need to be doing your delete codes. You still need to be learning on the side. It's a non-negotiable, in my opinion, because the deeper understanding you have of your code and your tools, the more value you're going to get out of these tools, whether it's Colat Code, whether it's Cursor, whether it's Windsurf, whatever, right? The more you understand your code, the deeper you can go and the more productive you can be. That's the first thing, right? The second thing is get comfy with Git. These two are the non-starters in my opinion, but you need to be a master at Git, but you do need to have a basic understanding of how to navigate what I mean with that, I mean like you should be able to make a branch on the fly. Like you should be able to branch off. You should. I mean, you would be surprised. Like I would be teaching some of these people, and these people just graduated from college, got a computer science degree, right? And I was like, okay, like now we're gonna make a new branch, and you're gonna commit, blah blah, right? And they were like, what are you taught? What does that mean, right? And this happened multiple times, so I know what I'm saying here sounds very basic, but you should have at least a walking understanding of Git. You should be able to branch off. You should be able to push and pull. You should be able to commit certain files only, ignore, etc., etc. These two are non-starters, and they're going to help you. The more you learn about Git and the more you learn about your understanding of your code base, it's only going to be a net positive nonstop. And you can't invest bad time into it, in my opinion. Larry in the chat, get commit, get push to me. Yes. No, get force push. Force push. If you're not force pushing, you are not trying. But these are the two things, in my opinion, that non-negotiable. Like you need to have these, right? And the more time you invest in these two things, the better. So that's the first, just to get it started. The second thing is picking your tool, right? Picking. Now the only IDE that I use is Atlas.dev, and you should too, and Tuna Code. But if we're being serious for a second, the market has become very saturated. There's so many different code agents, right? I mean, I'll just start naming some of them. Droid, right? That's one that comes to mind. Kimi CLI just came out with their own. You got Cloud Code, obviously. You got Cursor. I mean, you just got the brand new anti-gravity. Jesus. What else? I mean, these are just off the top of my head, right? You got Codex, which is blowing up. I think there was one called Black Box that I just saw. But you get the idea, right? There's so many different tools at the Zeph. Yes, force. Yeah, when you force push, you're actually mogging your coworkers, and you should do it to show them that you mean business. But you get the idea, right? There's so many different tools, and this is just off the top of my head, right? Let me show some respect to the Turks out there at this Tuna Code. At the LMAO, I use NeoVim, Cloud Code, Lazy Get Dells. Yeah, for sure. And I would say you're an outlier, right? Like if you're using NeoVim, Vim, like you're pretty comfortable in the command line. I'm not gonna have to walk you through how to use an IDE, right? But you'd be surprised how many people don't know that. And some of these people are coming fresh out of college, maybe they only have a couple of years of experience. That's totally fine. The point here is like when you pick a tool, you really only need to pick one or two, right? Like, there's so many different ones now that all claim to be like the best, the top dog, right? In my opinion, if you're a complete beginner, I would say go with either Cloud Code, right? Go with Cloud Code or go with Cursor. These two, they're well supported. They're easy to pick up. Cloud Code now has an extension with Visual Studio Code. I think you can use it any IDE. Using Vim, obviously. Cursor, it's pretty much a Visual Studio Code fork. So any skills that you learn there, you're not going to pick up their specific agent, but it's an IDE that's Visual Studio Code, basically, right? So these two, in my opinion, if you're brand new to agentic coding, I would say it doesn't matter. But in my opinion, if you're going to pick one that you're going to say, hey, I want to become competent at one, I would say Cloud Code and Cursor, because these two tools, again, they're well supported. And like if you invest a lot of time into learning, I don't know, let's say Tuna Code, right? Like if you invest a lot of time into learning Tuna Code, right? It's one person supporting it myself, tunacode.xyz, by the way. But it's like, okay, is this still going to be around here a year? I plan for it, but right, stuff happens. Like there's so many of these projects that have been abandoned, and you don't want to invest time in something that's going to go away within a couple of months, a couple of years, etc. And these two have shown that they're going to stay in the market. So pick your tool. It doesn't matter if you're going with one. I would say either Claude Code or Cursor. And then now you can actually start into the, what do you want to call it? Prompting, coding, whatever. Let's say, I'm going to say, no, that's actually a bad word. Let's say workflows, right? Okay. So now we can actually start talking about the fun stuff. The fun stuff is actually using these code agents. And one of the things that I was really surprised about when I started teaching people at work how to use this is they would follow the pattern of like, I have a question. Let's say, how do I update the API? Let's say for off using, I don't know, Google, right? Just whatever bullshit. They would pick their code agent, Claude Code, let's say, or let's say Cursor, because that was the most picked one. They would say, okay, I have a question. The agent would respond, right? Response. The agent would give you like, oh, you want to use that? Here's your response. It sounds totally confident. It sounds totally like, oh yeah, this seems right. And then they would just apply it, right? So they're following this basic question, response, apply. And that's fucking terrible. That's probably the worst thing you can do. And that's one of the first eye openers of why certain people are having like such drastic differences, right? Like you speak to some people and you would think Claude Code is like the second coming of Jesus Christ. And then other people are like, oh man, it's a terrible tool. I can never get to do what I want, blah, blah. And then this goes for any tool, right? Codex, Cursor, Windsurf, whatever. The difference between users and like the experience they're having, it's so vast because some people are just one-shotting stuff, which if you're working on a simple project, totally understandable. Like that's, especially if it's a small one. But once you start to get into enterprise code bases, right, you're dealing with a minimum of like 50,000 lines of code, right? Just off the rip, just off the top. And you're dealing with probably a ton of tech debt from the old team that was there, or maybe another team member, etc. So this workflow, it's not going to even, like I would say, don't even bother doing this because it's going to set you up for a bad time down the road. The workflow you need to approach when you're using a code agent, and a bunch of people have talked about this, so I'll make sure to link to their stuff as well. Actually, I think, what's his name? There's a really good article as well from this person. But the basic pattern is research. Right, it's planning. It's executing. And I would add one more out. I would say that's QA. So if you follow the basic pattern over here, I'll pull it up. Right, if you follow a basic pattern of saying like, let's do, how do I update the React agent to use more precise code? Just some nonsense, right? So I'm going to ask it a basic question. It's going to think, right? Now, Claude Code has actually gotten pretty good at this, right? Where if it doesn't understand what you're asking, it'll ask you to clarify, right? So perfect example here. Let's say type in, doesn't matter. But what I have found is like you almost never want to take the first response to these type of questions, right? And maybe it's a bad example here because Claude is actually pretty good at this. The idea is like you don't want to take the code agent's advice off the rip. You want to think about it, say, hey, like what's actually going on? And Claude Code is doing a pretty good job here of asking me that. So I don't know, let's just say the code. Nice from, sorry, I can't see. Oh, I want to block you. Sorry, I can't see your name. Thank you for joining. But you get the idea, right? Like and this is part of the reason why you don't want to do is because every single thing you're seeing here, all these actions, they're taking up context and the main enemy of this coding, agentic coding, whatever you want to call it, is context rot, model. What do you call it? What do the nerds call it? Model collapse, something like that. I don't know. Basically, the model gets dumber the more inputs it has. The context window gets filled, the model gets dumber. That's pretty much the pattern you want to follow. And one of the issues that you have with this pattern of question, response, apply is that your context window is going to get nuked within 2 to 3 turns. Whereas if you take the time to really say, hey, okay, what's my problem? My problem is X. Okay, let's open up a session. Let's start searching. And you can do this with Claude, Cursor, whatever you want to do. And you should probably spend most of your time researching the problem. And what I mean by research, I mean like asking Claude, running sub-agents, etc., to get the context for your problem. And then you kill the conversation or move it on. But now you go from all of a sudden to having a 10,000 token context, right, to compressing that to the summary or the output, which is 1,000 tokens. Moving on to a planning phase. Okay, now all of a sudden you have all these tokens to work with, and you're going to have much better results in the long term because of it. So I'm just going to kill this here just to stop it. So a better way to approach it, in my opinion, is to do something like here. Is to take the time to research, right? And you have a bunch of different slash commands that you can do. So for example, I have a slash command that's strictly dedicated to researching, and it spins up 3 sub agents. I got it from Human Layer, which I'll definitely include in the article, but basically the first phase is the longest phase. It's the phase that's going to take the most tokens because the agent doesn't have any memory, right? Every time you boot up an agent, it's essentially starting from scratch, and you need to feed it very specific context. Because if you say, hey, go do this, go fix the authentication module, right? What does that mean? Okay, well, all of a sudden, now an agent has to use 90% of its usable context window, which I would say is about 40, 50%, to just get context for your question. So you really need to break this up into different phases. At a minimum, you should have a research phase, and you should be spending the most time there. And that's where you really need to get in there and say, hey, the code agent saying that the off module needs to be done this, right? But I know from my experience, because I'm a human being, that it's not going to work because of X-rays, right? Cut, compress, take that summary, take it to the next phase, and save your context window, because that's going to be your main enemy in these flows, right? So let's say something like we need to, and it's just a basic question to get this moving. I got a new keyboard, so forgive me, but the idea is simple. You're going to have a much better time following some sort of pattern that looks like this, researching, planning out, and executing. And in my opinion, to have a QA phase, but that's for later. The main enemy here is going to be the context window size. And Claude Code here, I'll show whenever it gets done. It has a really good tool for context, but Cursor has it as well now in the input for the text box. So I would say once you start to reach about 40% of the context window, maybe 50, I would say kill it, start a new run, and don't use any of the compression techniques that they have. From all of my testing, from C-Line, from root code to Claude Code, all the compression leads to bad outputs. You should essentially have a workflow that does that within your regular research phase, and then move it on to the next stage of whatever workflow you're doing. Let's say 50%. Kill the run. Start fresh. So once you reach 50% of your context window, I don't care what model, I don't care what tool, kill it, start run fresh with a new context window. Let's see where this is at. So right now it's spinning up some sub agents, and that's actually a really good next topic, and I'll probably end it here next 10 minutes or so. Thank you for everyone who pulled up. All these this is 20,000 tokens just got used just for locating Python files in the code base, right? If you were still asking questions within this, you're gonna have a very bad time, because anyone who's used any models, any ChatGPT, whatever, it just gets worse as the conversation gets longer. There's a bunch of different academic reasons that I can't explain. You can go look it up. There's a bunch of papers on context routing and context windows on Arvix. You can probably go and find. But basically, the basic rule is the more tokens you use, the worse experience you're going to have. So something to keep in mind. Okay, so we've covered non-negotiables, picking your tools, workflows, blah, blah. The next thing I would say is subagents. And really what this is subagents slash context window saving, something like that. Saving workflows, I don't know. But the idea here is you want to do your work in phases. You want to have subagents so that you can save your context window. So I'll give an example here, right? Let's say you do your initial query. The agent then has to go and take the input. This will be the agent. And this is for anything, right? Even C-Line, I notice now has subagents. But basically, once the subagent, any agent really, takes your query, has taken the input, it has to reason. Has to take action, right? Whether it's going to go read a file, is it going to go update a file, etc., etc. It has to reflect, so to speak, and then it has to loop. Now, actually, I'll say take action / use tool. Right. All this takes a tremendous amount of context, a tremendous amount of tokens. If you do this and then you move on to your next query, right? You're starting at a very big deficit because of the context rot problem. So the idea of a subagent is that you do these steps independently, right? And then you move on to your next step. And you can save a bunch of time, a bunch of context, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that I really like to do is I like to spin up different research agents in the background. So I'll have 10 different issues on my regular job or my contracting work. I'll have a bunch of different issues. Okay, I'm going to spin up a bunch of Colat code subagents to go and research those in different work trees, which is probably a little bit advanced for the new person, but Git work trees are also another excellent tool to use. But the idea is basically the same. You need to save as much context as possible, and you want to do all of your grunt work, all of your token heavy work up front, and you don't want to work within that same context window to save tokens for the next task. So one of the things that I really like to do, and that I would recommend everyone does, is once you start working on your project, whatever it is, right? Work, side project, etc. Take the time to spin up this research workflow. And again, this workflow goes for any agent: C-Line, root code, Cloud code, Cursor. Even Cursor has a really good plan mode now. Take the time to run that research in the background if you can. So while you're working on another issue, right? While you're working on the authentication module, you have another sub agent in a different context window working on the next issue, right? Researching, getting you context, getting you prepared for the next issue to deal with. And you don't even have to think about it, right? You're just working on your own siloed issue. So the idea with subagents, it's simple. It's you want to outsource the grunt work of context gathering to a different agent so that you can start working on your own context window and have a better experience, right? So that's really the idea of a subagent, is just to save context window, in my opinion. The execution phase is actually the easiest one, right? Because if you Jesus Christ, forgive, I'm trying to get used to this new keyboard. The idea here is the biggest issue I see is people don't make rollback points. So going back to what I said about learning Git at a fundamental level, before you start any work, before the agent takes any right actions, I would say you want to have a rollback point. What do I mean with that? I mean, like, okay, let's stay with the authentication module example. If you have a code agent that now has all your context, you have somewhat of a plan to start the work. You don't want to just start shooting into it. You don't want to just start going, because what if the code agent goes crazy, right? What if the agent, for whatever reason, these non-deterministic tools, as the nerds call it, what if it just takes some crazy, stupid action that you know is just wrong, right? What if it starts using sync instead of async? You get the drift. You should just have, before you do any work, let's make an empty rollback point. Write a message that says, hey, before we start any work, we're doing an empty commit to have rollback points, and then start work, right? And ideally, you have this broken down to at least, a few different phases, right? So you roll back, you start phase 1. There we go. You start phase 1. You commit. You start phase 2. You commit. Start phase 3. You commit. You should be committing within each of these phases, right? You should be committing in case anything goes wrong, in case you have to roll back, in case you see something that you should definitely be reviewing the outputs of a code agent. Like, I'm surprised at sometimes how many people aren't. And again, if it's something simple, right, there's really no need. Like if you're changing a color of a component, probably don't need to watch it each step. But that's one of the ways people get in trouble, is they just let the agent go, right? And I've seen certain situations where it's like, oh, I was using whatever code agent, right? I came back and there's 7 new files, right? We were just doing this one simple refactor that has now turned to this huge mess. And because it's worked in the past, right, because it was able to one-shot it, now they think that they can do that for everything. And this is what you want to do in order to avoid any issues, right? You want to execute, and you want to have good discipline of rolling back, phasing, committing, and pushing up as you work. And then once you get good at this workflow, the next thing is to, now some people, they obviously disagree or they have their own idea. Okay, you get the idea, right? Once you do all this, the most important step, in my opinion, is that you need to have an insanely, like a crazy discipline for quality control. Because if you start letting the agent do sloppy work, if you start doing sloppy work, right, what ends up happening is like, oh, just this one time, right? Just this one time we'll push without checking the pre-commit hooks, or, just this one time we'll use the function, even though it's repeating instead of a class, right? The agents will want to take the shortest path to whatever goal you have. And it's really tempting at times to just let it go. Hey, it said I did a good job. It said it wrote the test, whatever, just send it, right? And that's probably the biggest net negative that I see, and the biggest issue that I have noticed is that if your QA phase is not good, you're gonna have a very bad time. And 90% of the issues, let's not get crazy, let's say 70% of the issues that I've seen with code agents is because the QA process was, oh, looks good to me, merge it, ship it, who cares, right? You need to have a crazy level of standards, even higher than regular humans, because of how the code agents can reward hack, take actions that they're taking, that they say they're taking, but they're not actually taking, right? They're not actually running tests. I mean, it's happened to me multiple times with even the best models, right? So your QA phase needs to be like insanely disciplined. There's a bunch of different tools you can use. Like, for example, I like CodeRabbit. I've seen people write certain workflows within Colat code to use, etc. You can set up your own actions. There's even skills now you can use Colat code. But the idea is the same, right? The idea is you need to have that QA phase be extremely disciplined so that it doesn't allow slop to get merged. Slop meaning tech debt, messy code, repeating code, etc. Because once you start allowing it in, it can creep up, and all of a sudden, you're 4 weeks down the road for project, and those few times that you've allowed that slop to merge, well, those have caused now multiple issues that could have been avoided if you had just taken a little bit more time to QA and really review, really, have this branch process of, Git, really have these rollbacks, right? Okay, if you have a bunch of slop, okay, wait, we committed in between phases. Where did this go wrong? Okay, it went wrong here. Let's roll back. Okay, now we have context. Now we know, hey, Cloud Code, don't ever do that stuff again. It's probably not going to listen, but you can at least catch it, right? That QA phase is the key, in my opinion, and the one that you should take that little extra time. Research, in my opinion, takes the most time, but that QA phase needs to be extremely disciplined. Okay, I got to wrap it up, guys. Thank you for everyone who showed up. I'll catch you guys later. I'm going to try to take these ideas and put it into a article. But the basic idea is get comfy with Git, get a deep understanding of your code base, your tools, pick one or two. You don't need to get crazy. Have some sort of workflows, save your context windows, and execute in a phased fashion. That's pretty much it. Thank you, and I'll catch you guys later.